Sounds good.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our latest CA Datacom community webcast entitled Maximizing Your CA Datacom Investment for the New Application Economy. This morning, we're joined by Sheila Miller and Kevin Schuma, who will be our presenters. Before I hand off to them, just a quick reminder that if you have any questions along the way, please use the Q&A box in the lower right of your WebEx screen. If you don't see that screen right now, all you need to do is click on the question mark icon at the top of the screen, and it will open for you. And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Sheila.
Thanks, Len. I appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for the webcast. We certainly appreciate your time and consideration. My name's Sheila Miller. I'm the Principal Product Manager for our CA Datacom and IDMS databases. I'm based in Framingham, Massachusetts. And joining me today is Kevin Schuma, who is the VP of Product Management and the Global Head of our database group within the CA Mainframe Business Unit. So let me get to the next slide here. Okay, so the abstract basically summarizes today's focus, which is really all about modernization and system optimization capabilities that will assist in maximizing your Datacom investment. So our agenda really today covers the following topics. We'll talk about why you should modernize CA Datacom. We'll give you an overview on relational implementations, talk about the benefits of ODBC, JDBC, and Ideal Web Services, and then we'll give you a high level on some options that will actually help you improve performance, scalability, and usability within your Datacom environment. Sorry, I'm having a hard time adjusting these slides here. Okay, so this slide really just depicts our modernization approach and basically sets the stage for today's discussion. We totally recognize that our customers have many years invested in Datacom, running your mission-critical business systems across the globe. So this is really why we continue to develop new ways to help our customers shape and adapt these systems to the modern world. So, for example, if you take a look at the slide, you'll see that our Datacom SQL and server options, as well as our vStorm partner offerings, really bridge the gap between your critical Datacom systems and the new application economy of web, mobile, cloud, and big data. So we also can provide compression savings through Datacom PressPack. We enable our customers to measure and manage performance through CA SISView and CA Mainframe Application Tuner, or what we term as MAT. And we're also currently addressing customer concerns around the declining IDMS Datacom skill sets with our newest offering called M3A, which we'll talk more about as we get towards the middle of this deck. So those are the primary topics of discussion for the remainder of our session. So let me just give you a real high level on modernizing the application environment before I turn it over to Kevin. So how do you maximize business value? So most of you, I think, at this point know that and realize the benefits of our modernization, opening up your legacy environments using open source or third-party tools for better flexibility, increased productivity, improved customer self-service. Again, just bridging the gap between the legacy and the modern application economy. So we also realize it's getting more and more difficult for our customers to find appropriate skill sets, which really makes it even more important to leverage existing skill sets by providing more modern tools and offerings to our customers. So our goal is to address these types of challenges through our modernization offerings. Taking the mainframe modernization path really reduces the cost by leveraging your current investment. You're preserving the applications in place, which reduces the risk of migration, and also using modern developer skills. Okay, so when we talk about modernizing Datacom, there are really two different dimensions that we think about. One is modernizing Datacom databases so that we can leverage the data and then can access them through web services using standard interfaces. And the other is modernizing the CA Ideal applications, where we reuse the business logic, and we do that by consuming or invoking web services from the Datacom applications, or repurposing the Datacom applications to provide web services. So this is accomplished by, let's move to the next screen here. Okay, so this is accomplished by using standard APIs, so SQL, ODBC, JDBC, SOAP, REST, HTTP, and TCP/IP, and the products that are part of the Datacom modernization suite to basically enable this. That includes the CA Datacom SQL, CA Datacom Server, and the CA Ideal Web Services. So that's a real high level, just kind of to preface the discussion at this point. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to kind of delve deeper into some of the technical details, and then I'll be back with you towards the end of the presentation. So Kevin, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Thanks, Sheila, and welcome everybody. As Sheila introduced me earlier, I'm the Vice President of Product Management. But basically, you all know me. I've been around with Datacom for quite a few years. And Sheila and I are working together to bring the IDMS and Datacom products hopefully into the modern age. I mean, what we would like to see us clients do is be able to utilize everything they currently have on Datacom, continue to make it perform better, faster, do all the things we want to do with the existing, but then to take the next step and expose all of that data, all that really great business logic to a new modern application system, and to have that coexist, not change from one to the other, but do it as a coexistence strategy. So I'm having the same issues you are, Sheila. I'm clicking, but it's not moving. Oh, there it goes. Sorry. Yeah, it takes a little longer. Those bits have to fly back and forth between New York and Texas and Boston. So the very first thing we want to talk about is implementing SQL Access. Now, this is a subject that most people should have seen before. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. The idea here really is to understand that all your existing Datacom data is SQL accessible. We can take that data without really making significant changes to it and make it available to the modern application, but not displace or disrupt any of the existing legacy applications. So the process is pretty simple, is to select which Datacom tables do you want to have SQL access for, enable the SQL accesses through making a change in data dictionary, and today that is one change where you will have to take the database offline when we recatalog the definition. It doesn't change the definition or change the data or change the apps using it, but we do need to have the database offline for a brief moment when we recatalog the definition. And when we catalog the definition, it basically will now populate the SQL-specific attributes into an area called the DDD that we use for our SQL processing. Again, at the very end of this, you now have SQL access to the same Datacom table that was non-SQL a few minutes before. It does not require any data reformatting or any change to existing legacy applications. This is what allows us to actually have SQL operate against DL1 transparency. So if you have a DL1 application that you moved into Datacom 20 years ago and you're running it through DL1 transparency, you can actually enable that application and use it from SQL. I mean, it's that kind of power that's built into these tools. So we announced last year that every site now has limited capabilities of using SQL and Server for building prototype and modernized applications through their Datacom DB or their basic Datacom license. Now, it is a limited version of SQL and Server in that you can use it to prototype, but you really couldn't use it probably to do a lot of application. It gives the DBA a tool to be able to utilize SQL and Server against the database. It also allows them to build out and test some of these new applications. And even what you consider old applications like Microsoft Excel can all be tested through this to show how we can use the existing Datacom data in a very simple application by extracting it into Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access, or into a Java programming language. So we provided SQL Web Connect to all the ZIOS sites that are currently at version 14 so that there's never a reason not to be able to test out the open systems access to this existing, in most cases, very large data set, large databases or set of data. Now, I highlighted the changes here, and this is a very, very, I guess, detailed eye chart, if you will. But basically, what we want to say is that when we come in, you have optional things you can do to the data dictionary data model in order to make SQL Access available. But majority of the changes are all within that one area of changing the table. So it's not hard to do this. You basically go into a table entity within the data dictionary structure, and you decide whether you want to have SQL intent of R or Y. R is read-only, and for sites that are opening SQL for the very first time on a database, maybe they have SQL and lots of other things, but you're going to open up SQL Access for the first time on a given database, you may start off with just SQL intent of R so that you can restrict it to read-only and prevent any update through SQL until you feel more comfortable with it. Y is full read, if you use Y, you get full SQL, so people can add, delete, and update through the SQL DML language. And then if you wish, you can actually go in and update the columns to provide SQL or more SQL-like names for the columns. If you don't, we'll generate them for you. So realistically, there's about 3 parameter changes you have to make in the data dictionary model to make a table available for SQL Access. Once the table is made available and you have that SQL intent as either Y or R, you have the SQL Access after the data dictionary catalog to the CXX. And we show in here is in the center is this basically a typical demo program. We always utilize payroll and personnel or demo database. So at the right here, we see that it's just a very simple SQL statement, select star from personnel, that suddenly gives you a nice report of all the information in the personnel database. And we did this without having to do any kind of special structure or write a COBOL program for it. And what we used to do that was this little utility off to the left there called DBSQLPR. DBSQLPR, if you're a DB2 user, is much like Spoofy. It's a batch process that allows you to execute any SQL statement. It lets you do it. It creates an ad hoc report. If you do a select statement, as we show here, you'll get this cute little ad hoc report. It does allow you to do updates and inserts, so you can do quick data fixes. I really wouldn't recommend that unless you're very experienced with the data. And if the person has the SQL intent turned to R, then you'll be blocking that, which might be a good thing to start with. It does allow you to have dynamic system table access, so it's a very nice tool to go out and look at our dynamic system tables, the things that we use to do tuning with. And the one thing that most people aren't aware of is that DBSQLPR can actually extract data out of the Datacom table and place it into a comma-separated, or what I prefer to have it is preliminary separated format. I use DBSQLPR and the SQL Access to export large segments of data using very complex logic, finding where the person was sick. I'm looking for everyone who was sick on a Monday or Friday following a holiday weekend. I can create whatever kind of logic I want like that, put it into the SQL statement, execute it through DBSQLPR, but instead of getting a report, I can actually have it generate a comma-separated file that I can load into Excel. Now, you can do exactly the same thing through the server option using our ODBC capabilities with Excel over on server, but just from a batch perspective, it's a very powerful tool to be able to have SQL access to your data and be able to go out in those emergency situations and find specific information you need to find very quickly using a very simple tool like DBSQLPR. Now, one of the things that we want to point out with SQL Access is that some folks may have some data structures. Remember I mentioned that DL1 transparency is now accessible to Datacom SQL? Well, it may not have a relational structure. What I mean by that is it may not be a nice set of simple fields that are all defined in normal relational SQL terms. It may actually have some group columns, redefined fields, occurring fields, etc. So as a simple little way of doing this, you can run a report. It's available in all the releases, current releases of Datacom. You do not have to have SQL Access turned on to run this report, but you can execute the SQL column report. point it at any given table, or sometimes I just run it at all the tables in the database. And what I'll be able to do with that is look at those tables and see which tables have data that's fully SQL accessible and which tables have data that may need to be extended in order to be able to see that data as SQL columns. Now what we see here in the display that I have up, that this is a specific record that I created on purpose for our system that we wrote called Policy History that deals with a bunch of insurance policies and so forth, where we actually have data that gets redefined. It's got group fields. It has occurring clauses. That data is not normally available to SQL. So we see here that when we look at this record, that probably 2/3 or even more than that, maybe 75% of the data in this table, while it's SQL accessible, is not really readable at the lower SQL level. So if we try to read some of this data, we're only going to either get, in the case of a group field, we won't see it at all. In the occurrence clause, we'll only see the entire occurrence. We won't see the individual items. And a redefined, we only see the first definition. So in some cases, we make a table SQL accessible, and then we find out that the data is not structured in an SQL way that we can actually read it. Well, what's really nice is, in pointing this out, you're saying, well, why would he show something bad about Datacom? Well, that's because we actually, several releases back, created a utility for you, an extension to SQL for you called a Datacom View. Now, once you create the Datacom View, the SQL Access, the screen we just looked at, will be all better. Everything will look good. And SQL tools such as ODBC and JDBC, those guys will see this fully defined table. What we need for you to do is generate ahead of time, again, run the column report, look at what's out there that's not SQLable, and then create a Datacom View. The Datacom View is for SQL only in Datacom. It's not something that other databases use. It will support all the standard SQL DML, so you can add, update, delete through the view just like you would the normal table. And it gives you the capability of, A, looking at parent fields, compound fields. You can now see them. So instead of seeing first name, last name, you can actually see the group field name and actually make action on it. You can update name if you wish to. You can see single dimensional arrays, so occurrence clauses show up. You can actually see redefined columns. So if you have a record, as in the previous case, where we had 3 types of information that was redefined depending upon which kind of record type it was, you now make it all accessible through the Datacom View concept. And this is very low impact. Once you create the Datacom View and it's cataloged into the DDD, it's now seen as a standard SQL view and has no overhead to processing. In fact, you can actually join rows from the same base table using a Datacom View with another Datacom View. So if we went back to that reoccurrence where we had a redefined column where there was credit data and address data, we can actually see that as 2 separate views and actually join that together to create the expanded view of a person's address from record type A with his current policy information from record type P with his current credit information from record type C. And we see that in the SQL view as a completely, long-wise, if you will, all the information together, even though it was stored in one Datacom table as 3 different defined record types within that table. Now, there's complete information available for this out in the database SQL guide as well as the system administration guide. Now we see that that same column report that defined all these columns as not being available through standard SQL, we now see that they're all available through our SQL, through the Datacom View extension. Now there are some rules about what you want to do with this. Now understand that if we make the data available through the SQL view, we are going to be acting upon it. So if you update a group column through the Datacom view, it's going to actually update the child records underneath it or child columns underneath it. So if you update name, make sure you update it in a way that when it places it into the name field, that it updates the first name and last name correctly, the children field. Now, one of the things that we found it was hard for clients to do is in creating the Datacom view, there was a lot of typing that went on. They would have to type out each one of the fields and what the group field was and how they wanted to see it, etc. So there is a utility that's been available for the last several releases where you can actually go out, ask us to look at a given table and generate a set of skeleton views for that table. We found it's much easier for us to generate the Datacom view for you and then let you go out and delete the columns or take out what you don't want or add the logic you need than it was to basically have you type it from scratch. It makes it really simple. It's almost like the old data query where you do the draw table and it would give you the data query with all the columns and then you just remove the columns you don't want. Same thing here. We'll build the Datacom views. Group columns are shown with their children right below it. Reoccurs show up and you have basically the main occurrence, and then if it's a date field occurs 12 times, you'll have 12 separate occurrences underneath it, 1 through 12 with a number on them. If it's a redefined, we'll show you every definition. Now, in the case of a Datacom view created for a redefined record, you obviously want to go in and delete out the definitions you don't want for this view. Maybe you call it the policy address view, and we go in and we delete out the columns that don't deal with the address. And then we add a where clause that says where type is address. And then we take that same Datacom view that we started with and we copy it to another one called the Datacom policy credit view. And we do the same thing, but we only include credit information with the where clause of where it's a credit record. Makes it very easy for you to create a Datacom view without having to go through a lot of extra work. Again, once you have the views in place, then any SQL user, any ODBC, JDBC user, they see that all as just like a standard table, so they can really see the data in a normalized form, even though it was in a not normalized form within the base table. We didn't have to change the data, we didn't have to change the base table definition, and we never affected any legacy application. We've given the kind of access you need without removing any or changing any of your basic traditional stuff you have there. So there's no downside to this. It's basically all upside and making things more available. Now, with any new modern access, we obviously want to be very careful, make sure we're doing things the right way, etc. But this does make it very easy to make tables that aren't relational very relational. So just to give a little map, basically when we look at the normal SQL access to one of these non-relational definitions, we see group columns aren't available. We see that the occurs show up as one large char field. We see redefined that only the first redefine is actually seen by SQL. The second redefine does not show up. And we basically would require you to have a where clause. Now remember, if you're using standard SQL and you have redefined columns, every row will be verified against the first set of redefined columns. So if you have numeric columns and character columns, when you get one of those numeric rows and you actually read it and you're using the character definition, it will fail because it will not provide, the numeric data does not match the definition that standard SQL knows, which is that first definition we see. So even in standard SQL, since we only see the first redefined, you have to make sure it has a where clause that matches or only selects rows that match that first definition. Or you need to remove those columns because those redefined columns won't work if you get one of those other columns that don't match the SQL definition for the column. With the Datacom View, we see that group columns are available, but as we said, it includes all the subordinate columns. So if you make an update to a group column, make sure that you match the update so that it fits over top of the subordinate columns. I would probably say, as a good rule, you probably want to read from the group column but update the child columns to make sure that they fit correctly, that you don't have to worry about spacing out the group field the correct way. The occurs clauses is sort of the reverse of that. The occurs clause is still there. It's still that very large char field, but you know you don't ever want to touch that because that's that it occurs 12 times and there's numeric numbers and all kinds of things there. We make each occurrence available with an individual column name. Now, in this case, we are going to give you a default name of like a date _1, date _2, date _3. You know, maybe the column name was personnel date. So we would have personnel date _1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have the option, since you're creating the Datacom View syntax, that you could actually changed that to say, well, I really don't want personnel date _1 because the users wouldn't know what that is. That's actually the hire date. So I could just go ahead and say hire date. Because you're creating a Datacom view, will give you a default name for the column. You can obviously change that to make it more meaningful. Instead of having amount 1 through 12, you may want to say pay amount for December, January, February, March. All those things can be done when you create the view. And then with the redefined columns, all the redefinitions are available. So what you need to do is take out the ones, add a where clause for the specific redefinition you want to see, and then take out the redefinitions that don't match that where clause. So in the end, we now have an SQL record that, or a table that is now fully SQLable, has all the columns available to see. We can now start processing it. Well, there's some other values to having SQL, and even people with SQL Web can use these features. And one of them is that you can implement business rules through the SQL Constraint feature. You have the capability of going out and making sure that certain columns only have data that is in a given array. Yes, the column type is character, but you want to limit it to A, D, or U. Add, delete, or update. You can add a constraint over that to make sure no user program accidentally changes it to a value that's not logical. Referential constraints provide the capability of having child columns refer to their parents. So you can make sure that if you have a referential integrity in place, that you can't delete a customer that still has outstanding orders, or you can't add an order for a customer that's not on your customer file. So we have the capabilities of putting these constraints in place. Now, the beauty of that is even though you're putting it in place through SQL, you have the capability of implementing it over top of your standard RAT and SAT processing. So if you put a rule in place that says you cannot delete a customer if he has open orders, it applies to whether you're deleting it through SQL or through RAT. So we add value, but even if we don't use SQL Access, we can still add value to our legacy applications by building in application rules that prevent applications from doing something bad. So this is just sort of an example of a domain constraint. You know, we want to make sure, turns out that we only allow account numbers between 1 million and 3 million, so we put a constraint in place so that you can't have an account 4 million. Our transactions, we only sell positive transactions. We don't give people money when they buy something. So therefore, we can put something that says you're not allowed to have a transaction that's a negative. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but you know, it could be like an order quantity. We could also do order quantity. Who orders -3? So we want to make sure that the order quantity is always 1 or above. You can set a domain constraint that way. In the referential constraint, we see here that we always have a primary key, but a foreign key gives us the ability to say, hey, this transaction table, the account number in this transaction table must match an available account in the customer table. That way we can guarantee that we don't get transactions that are accepted that don't match an account. And as we said earlier, we can make sure that you don't delete this account if he has outstanding transactions. In addition to the SQL business rules that you can put in place, you can also include some more complex actions or automated actions with SQL. Again, you can do this even though you may not be using SQL programs. You can actually put in automated actions, and I've seen a client actually use this to do change replication. Anytime this table changes, I want you to basically copy the table row over here and let me see that that row changed. You can use it for auditing. There's all kinds of things you could use it for if you wish. What we do with a trigger basically is you invoke a specific procedure that we'll talk about in a second, which is a set of functions that Datacom's going to do. You're going to activate that either before the change or after the change. Well, why would you do it before the change? Well, you might want to make sure that this person's allowed to do this change before you let them do the change. You could do things before and after and either fail the procedure so that the change doesn't occur, or make the procedure happen in the case of like an audit trail generating what the change was. You get to see both the before and after data. So when you write your audit record, you could even put out the before and after data. Here's what it was going to be, and here's what it looks like it's going to be. And you can basically do it very simply by just saying, before I add something to this page, or before I change the quantity amount, generate this run stock check procedure. So before you sell an order, I want to make sure that I have enough on hand. And that's Roy Rogers' trigger over there. He's kind of coming into play. Now again, as we said, the trigger will fire whether it's SQL, RAD, or SAT. So again, you could put business rules in place on legacy applications, create audit trails, do other things without actually making changes to either the legacy application, and you don't have to implement SQL. You just implement the trigger and the procedure that it fires, and you have that capability of building onto your environment with a modern kind of thing without having to change anything in the background. It does give you consistent processing. Obviously, if a trigger is an audit trigger, it's going to fire every time someone updates that, whether or not they remembered to put the call to audit in their program or not. You know, this again comes to that case where, yeah, every program currently generates audit records, and we're all happy about that, and then someone adds a new program, forgot to do it, and suddenly half your changes are missing. So it's all there, it's flexible, and it's transparent to the user. So this is basically what a trigger would look like. Just create a trigger on this table after they update the quantity. Make sure that if the old quantity went from greater than 10 or 10 or greater to less than 10, generate a restock order. Why do we want to do that? Well, we want to have a minimum quantity of at least 10 on this item. Now, why we're checking the old data is to make sure that if it's going from 9 to 8, that we don't go ahead and generate a reorder twice. We only want to generate the reorder when you cross the 10 boundary, because we know it's never going to go up again until we get the next order in place. So once we get 10 more or 15 more or whatever ordered, the quantity goes up above 10. If it drops below 10 again, we want to then generate the next reorder. So this gives us capability of seeing both the old and new data so we can make decisions on whether or not we should fire the trigger. So we use this whole activity basically to generate a known procedure, and that procedure is going to be the action that is taken when the trigger fires. So a procedure basically is just business logic. What is it we want to do? What does that procedure have to do in order to meet it? And you can basically use this in some cases with like ODBC and JDBC, where there's a lot of conversation between the client and the database, where you can actually eliminate a lot of that network traffic by having a standard procedure that you call, have it execute all the background stuff, and just give the answer back. So in this example here, we see that we have this new order. When we have a new order coming in from the client, the very first thing is we open the order, then we verify the customer, we verify his inventory, we schedule the shipment, right? So we do multiple interactions between the actual PC task and the mainframe. Or we could just have one procedure that says, okay, he wants us to place an order. Let's go make sure we do everything, get all our ducks in a row, do all the pieces of work, and just come back to him and say, okay, order is placed. It saves that constant communication back and forth between the PC and the database region. So in this case, we're just using a trigger and a procedure. I'm sorry, a called procedure. It doesn't have to be a trigger here, but a called procedure just to reduce the amount of communication. So it's just another way of modernizing the application. As we said earlier, though, the cool part of this is you can do this, add these in place, and make use of these, and you don't need to update your, change the way your legacy applications work. Now, something new that we've added in the current 14.0 line, this was not in the base 14.0 product. If you followed some of our other webcasts, we've talked about the fact that we are delivering some significant enhancements in line to the 14.0 code base. And one of those enhancements we've delivered is a thing called a user-defined function table. Now, it's kind of hard to put it out there, but basically, it's a way for you to have a program that you can call that will build a subset of data that you could then recall and say, give me the first row, the second row, the third row. It's not really a temporary table but it basically creates something that you can actually utilize like a table by using an external procedure. So we call the procedure, it reads the data from 9 different tables and builds a subset of the data in memory that the procedure holds. Then you can actually call it and say, give me the first row, the second row, the third row. Do it just like you do with a normal cursor operation. And when you're done and you close out that procedure, then that data gets released back. But it's a way of building, you know, it's not truly a temporary table that's shared on other applications, but it is a sort of materialized view of data that you can use like a cursor. So it's cool. We've added this. It gives us capabilities to add in some really complex business logic. When you have to go out and read a whole bunch of different tables to find out whether a row exists before you read another row and do different things, that can all be done, have the result set built for you, and then allow the program then just to process the result set like that table existed like a normal table. These are very powerful things to use when you have one of those things where I can't write a select statement to find that. There's just no way I can get that SQL statement to actually put all this data together. I have to write 10 statements, and it's going to be really hard. You can create this complex logic, put it in a UDFT, and then utilize that in multiple programs. It makes it a way of encapsulating some very tough business logic so that a simple Java program or something like that can use it. As I said, this is brand new, just been added, and it's something that we have clients actively using right now very successfully. In a very limited way, but it's used a lot in our security area where they're doing a lot of specific security checks. So let's talk a little bit about modernizing applications. So I spent a lot of time talking about SQL, and SQL is really the base to modernizing. We've had it for quite a few years. We've done a lot that we can do to it to make it more powerful for you. We've made it such that you can use the data that you have with SQL so that we don't have to go through rewriting applications. But the truth of the matter is the majority of power behind SQL is the fact that you make that data now available to these standard ODBC and JDBC applications that exist outside of our mainframe world. So we want to basically say the next step in modernizing the applications is to allow you to create new applications using modern tools through ODBC and JDBC. So basically, Datacom Server just provides that ability for you to see Datacom just as another data source. So when you have these ODBC programmers and they say, I don't know what Datacom looks like, you say you don't need to know. All you need to know is it's just a data source that has tables and columns, and you can talk to it through ODBC just like you do Microsoft SQL Server database. So it gives them that kind of capability so that people who are not mainframers, who are not COBOL programmers, still have that capability of writing applications against all that really good data you have in your databases. So we kind of drew a picture here focused on Datacom Server and how you would build a web service. You know, basically you're going to create a consumer who's going to consume a web service. That web service is just using Datacom underneath the covers through Java, and Datacom Server is managing that communication with Datacom to retrieve the data. Now in most cases, that communication from server to Datacom is going to be an SQL statement. So yeah, in order to build this trap that we see here, this nice post up from top to bottom, this sensor element right here is we've done that work we just talked about in making these tables SQL accessible. If these tables are SQL accessible, the database engine can bring that information up the server as an SQL source. Then the next step of creating this web service is basically, do you know how to code Java, and can you create a web service? You can. There you go. You have the capabilities. Again, the beauty of that is the changes we made to allow these columns, these tables to be seen through SQL up through server did not in any way affect our legacy applications over here on the left side. They're running just like they always have. They got their pretty green screens. Everybody's happy. So you give the capability of having new development go on without upsetting all the stuff that's running your business. If you come in through a source like Excel, and we use Excel as a simple way of doing it because everybody has Excel on their desktop, you come in through Excel and you just issue an ODBC call against that Datacom source, and it shows you all the tables that are available in a nice Excel form. You can get in Excel then from there and pick a specific table you want to look at, and you can actually have that information in that table built into an Excel spreadsheet. So a tool as simple as Excel that everybody knows how to use can suddenly be used to retrieve data from Datacom and build nice Excel spreadsheets without having to go out and learn any new technology. We don't have to move the data from the mainframe to the Microsoft server to go against it. We can basically just use any tool we have through that OWC connection into the database. Now, if you have SQL Web Connect, this is great. You can do that right now with SQL Web Connect. The only limit on SQL Web Connect is only a couple people can do this at one time. Going to the next step, Server also provides JDBC access or Java access. Java is a little bit more complex in that most cases Java is going to be talking about people wanting to write programming tools. Now, there are some tools that we'll talk about in a few seconds that are actually pre-coded tools that use Java against Datacom just like Excel does. But a lot of times people today are, when they're talking about Java, they're talking about actually using Java to modernize the Datacom applications. They're going to write, they have a Java programmer who wants to write Java code, but he wants to use the Datacom application. Here's a nice simple query, basically, in standard Java terms of how to get information from that same table within Java. When you run that query, we see that we can do some things like we can actually, if you look back at that query that we looked at here, we saw it in the beginning, we were asking it to get some metadata and some information about who we were talking to, as well as getting data from the table. So we're actually combining two things here. What's the environment I'm talking to, and what data is in this table in that environment? So the result of that table, or that query in Java, is we can get some basic background. Hey, it came from a Datacom DB version 14 environment, and, oh, by the way, here's the information that was in that table. So we have this capability of, as a programmer, going the next step beyond Excel, and that we're actually going to ask questions about the environment and get those, as well as getting the data. So Java gives us that capability that most people are looking for today for internal development, where they want to do new application development. Java is one of the key languages or primary languages for that new application. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some new product integrations, and this is something new that you may not have known, but one of the big industry challenges we have, and we're actually looking internally as this is a tool that we really want to use internally, and that is that when you're actually testing and writing new applications, you're typically writing it against test data. The problem with the test data is there's not enough of it. It's not, doesn't look enough like production, doesn't have the right kind of relationships to demonstrate how these tables interact. So when we actually create the test system, it runs really well, but when we move it up to production, we have problems. And one of the statements that's down here from James Martin and in this vendor study was basically that, a defect found in production costs 40 to 1,000 times more resources to fix than one that was found when we're doing either requirements or back here doing design and testing. So what we're saying here is, okay, we have this requirement that test data is a real challenge for us. How can we make that better? Basically, the next thing we want to look at is that if we go to the next step, is that CA is now acquired and we're building a partnership with a set of tools called grid tools. Grid tools are a set of tools that allow you to use the open systems Java environment to actually inquire against data and then go to the next step of actually building out test data that you can use. And it does have the capabilities of doing things like designing the data for a test case. It can manage the data, but it can also do things like mask the data and build in capabilities. So you have data that is relational. This table relates to that table. You have the right kind of table relationships, but you're masking out the name, social security number, whatever. So we think this is a real cool integration that we're building out, and we're actually testing right now between grid tools and the Datacom JDBC server interface. And basically, this is a diagram of all the different things that grid tools can get to. We want to kind of take and push them all to the right and put Datacom and IDMS in there. This is one of our goals, to have a certified Datacom IDMS implementation with grid tools that gives you all this capability. Now, the last, sorry, I'm clicking here. The last thing we want to talk about real briefly, because we're running out of time here, is Hibernate. A lot of folks want to talk about Hibernate. They see Hibernate as a generic data source, that a way of creating data, industry standard applications, and you don't need to know the database storage. So we see people who are wanting to write Java in this Hibernate dialect and create that against all their data sources, whether it's Datacom or IDMS or whatever. Well, the interesting thing is, using Datacom Server and our JDBC interface, we now have available a beta version of a Hibernate dialect that you can actually use to go against the Datacom data source through JDBC. So we're actually creating this environment where, if you want to use something like Hibernate, which is if you will, a higher level version of Java, or I guess a common version of way of looking at database tables through Java, we have that available. All of this is now available to the clients through the ODBC JDBC activity of server, once you have SQL accessibility to your data. So that's how we build the modernization and work our way up. Now, last thing I want to talk about real quickly is Ideal and Ideal Webs. If you watch the announcements, we announced with Ideal version 15 the ability to support documents as well as normal strings for Ideal Web Services. So Ideal Web Services now has the capability of building and consuming documents. We see that in this very simple demo we have here. On the left side, we've kind of pushed this picture over and said, hey, well, wait a minute. Ideal and Cobalt were over here in the transaction server environment. We're now going to add Ideal Web in. Ideal Web is not an extra cost option. It's just part of the Ideal product. You can use it. Anyone with Ideal can use it. Ideal Web with document support is an Ideal version 15 thing. So we now say, well, instead of just having our CICS guys talking to Ideal and going to the database, let's go ahead and allow you to have a consumer running as a web service talking to Ideal Web and going to the database. Now, unlike the Datacom server side, where we see that we have IP and a bunch of other things over here, this consumer over here on the left side is actually talking to Ideal Web, and it's going to do it through support that we have available to us through the CICS transaction server. So the bridge actually between the web and CICS is coming from CICS. This makes it much simpler for us from an architecture point of view to take that CICS Ideal application and make it a web service. So what do we do with it? We're basically going to take out the Ideal screens. We're going to take 3270 screens away and replace that with an ability to build and produce documents. So we have the ability to either extract information from the document and parse it, and we can build parameters to go in and find the information. Once we fill out the document, we can have that document then be produced back out as a web page. And we can do DDT or XSD type of documents. So here's your typical Ideal program. We went into the Ideal program, we threw away the panels, and we took the new document element that you can define for the Ideal program, and instead of having a panel, we defined a document. It looks much like the panel definitions. It's someone who writes Ideal code can understand this very quickly. And we create what we call the graphic output from that document. Once you have that, instead of coming down here, here's your standard Ideal logic, but instead of saying, transport screen and transmit the screen, instead we're going to say produce the document. Very similar. It did not change your business logic at all. We just said take out the screen and put it in the document. After you've done that, the end result is going through the CICS web browser, the CICS CICS Transaction Server's web bridge. We now have the ability to actually display a graphical image versus doing something through a normal green screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Sheila and give her 10 minutes to finish off the presentation. Steve?
Thanks, Kevin. I thought you'd never ask.
I think I'm trying to. I think I just made you the presenter. Do you have control?
Yes, you did. I'm good to go. So for the remainder of our session, what we'll do is share with you a high level on a number of different options. One of which is a brand new offering called M3A, along with some of the tools which will assist in measuring and managing your Datacom environment. Okay, so M3A, we're all very excited about this. This is something that's taking off quite quickly here at CA, and it's an answer to one of the top requests from our customers. Really, this offering caters to customers experiencing a decline in their workforce, primarily due to retirement and looking to CA for assistance. So what does the M3A stand for? It stands for Monitor, Measure, Manage, and Alert. So as part of the service, we actually provide our customers with a skilled remote technician who will augment our customers' resource pool to run and maintain their environment. So they do things like monitor production environments, will establish performance baselines to measure and track production, will make recommendations as needed around performance tuning, database expansion, those types of things. And the M3A team will be there to support the customer and provide immediate technical assistance outside of what your level 1 would typically address. So it doesn't replace, but integrates with the technical support that you're all familiar with today. Okay, so just to take that a step further, some of the activities that will be included in the M3A offering is daily check-ins along with monthly and quarterly reviews, performance suggestions, and situation alerts. The staffing will include primary and backup technicians, and that actually is a combination of our internal CA resources as well as some of our external partners who are trained and certified by CA to be part of this offering. From a coordination perspective, the M3A staff all work from a single repository, so they have one view of the customer to ensure there are no gaps in supporting the customer, and those are all internal CA-type repositories that we provide access to the staff to. And there's a fee is based on a 1-year retainer plus a T&E if, in fact, the resource travels on-site for any reason. So, again, we're really excited about this offering, and if you're interested, please reach out to Kevin or I. We'd be happy to give you some more details on that. I think I just skipped 2 slides accidentally, so bear with me here. Okay, so back one. So SISView, this tool actually improves our customers' ability for remote monitoring and tuning of the Datacom environments, basically identifying problem areas and resource contention. So it provides things like centralized alerts and historical data for performance and analysis and reporting. It also allows you to monitor resource utilization to better predict growth and capacity needs. You can monitor task processing, detect problems, and dynamically terminate problems tasks. So there's a lot of different benefits to SISView. I think, it really, one of the primary benefits is that it enables our customers to be more proactive rather than reactive in detecting and correcting problems before they occur. So that basically gives them the opportunity to avoid costly outages to their business. Let's see here. So Datacom Press Pack, as you might guess from the name, it's a compression tool designed to compress large amounts of data, or large volumes of data. Basically, it reduces storage and DASI footprint, which results in cost savings to the customer. We have some benchmarks, but of course they vary in different, depending upon your environment, they vary. Right now, our benchmarks reflect anywhere from a 30 to 70% reduction in DASI. And I think one of the major differentiators of our press pack compared to some of the alternatives out there is our zip enablement. So basically, all of our compression utilities are fully zip eligible, which means all of our runtime compression and the decompression processing can be offloaded from the general purpose processor, or GPP, to the lower cost zip specialty engine. So that basically results in reduced CPU utilization, reduced MIPS consumption, and that's a huge saving unto itself. that also, one other point I wanted to make in regards to this, on top of that, in Datacom 14.0, we actually offer the ability to do an online data decompress processing without having to take any systems down or any system interruption. So that's basically improving, or further improving, I should say, high availability capability. So one point I wanted to make on this is that the customers can test drive this, do many POCs with this really easily, and by just basically applying a license key, so there's no installation required. So if you're interested in bringing this into your environment for a test drive, just reach out to your sales folks, your field sales folks, and request the license key, and they'll get you hooked up. Okay, Mainframe Application Tuner, or MAT as we refer to it, is complementary to SISView. Both SISView and MAT really form a cohesive solution. So while SISView detects problems within the production environments, MAT actually takes that to the next step to drill down into more of the application level, really to determine what caused the problem. So benefits include the ability to really measure the application performance and streamline the application lifecycle management. Kev, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. That's about all I had for the MAT. Do you have any additional comments?
Well, I mean, one of the things that MAT right now is we're working very closely with the MAT on their next release to add in additional support around SQL and some other things. It targets the current environment is targeting really around the record of time and set of time type of processing, which SQL does do, and tracks it that way, but we're also looking at ways of rolling out more of the MAT information into the SQL request. So the way we see MAT playing is you use SISView to notice that you have a problem in a MUF, and SISView can tell you the application that's making the bad request. You could then go to MAT and actually take that application program apart, the COBOL program apart, and find the place in that program where those requests are coming from, and it uses a sampling technique to find the heavy use areas. So it's kind of as you said, very complementary to SISView, and it does give us a capability of doing the next step drill down. So we know MUF's having a problem. SISView says, hey, it's not me, or MUF tells SISView it's not me, it's this COBOL program over here. You can then use MAT to take the COBOL program apart to figure out what's going on there.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so Verastone vStorm. As I mentioned earlier, Verastone is a CA partner. We actually resell their vStorm technology, which is all about mainframe to big data integration. So I think all of you all know that mainframe, really plays a huge role in big data space. I mean, I think the statistics are 71% of the global Fortune 500 companies still rely on the stability of the mainframe to continue to run their business, so you really can't talk about big data in isolation of Datacom, or for the mainframe for that matter. So these systems house massive amounts of customer-centric structured data, which is a critical source to the big data story. Some of the key benefits to Verastone include cost avoidance. So with this technology, you actually bypass the traditional ETL approach in favor of what Verastone refers to as extract, load, transform, or ELT. So the data is actually extracted over a live pipe to the cheaper platform before the actual load and transform occurs. So that's a huge savings on mainframe MIPS and DASD consumption. And as a result, it reduces your costly CPU cycles, it reduces the complexity of offloading the data, it shrinks storage requirements, and again, that's a significant cost savings to the customer. So once you're there, you obviously have the power of big data analytics, and you have the ability to do things like point-in-time data, fraud analysis, business compliance analysis, and the list really goes on and on as far as the benefits of big data. Okay. Okay, just a couple more slides we wanted to just cover before we go to Q&A. For those of you who aren't already a member of the Cadre user community, we strongly encourage that you participate. It's a great professional network with access to a bunch of different resources. You can learn about educational webcasts like this one. You can network with your Datacom development experts. You can learn about local global events. You can basically put your product requests out in the ideation site so that we can vote, people can vote on them, and we can take them in to do some further analysis on those. And it's just a great site. So, if you're not a member, please take the time to register. I think you'd find it worthwhile. And then CA World. So registration is now open for CA World 15 with special promotions. They have early bird discounts and some other promotional type things going on right now. So you should just go to ca.com/CA World to get some more information. It's being held at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas from November 16th to the 20th. And we've listened to our customers and have added back in more technical content, including some technical content on Datacom and IDMS. So again, just if you can go out to the website, you'll be able to pull down the content. And if you do register, be sure to list mainframe as your track of choice. Okay, and I think one more slide here. So as a follow-on to the CA World in November, we'll be again hosting our Cadre Technical Conference the week of April 25th. In our Plano Development Data Center. It was a huge success last year. We had a great time. I think everybody learned a lot, and we really hope that our folks can participate again next April. Sue Broody actually just recently posted out on the Cadre community site a save the date notice with some preliminary information. So there'll be more to come on this. So stand by, and we'll get some more info as we have it. And again, we hope you can join us for that exciting conference. Let's see here. I think that's it. Oh, one last thing. I do have to say this: that from a legal disclaimer, anything we say about the future is subject to change until it's GA. So that's the fine print. And now I think we can go ahead and open it up to questions. And again, if you have a question, I believe you go over to the panel here, which is Q&A, and just type in your question, and so fire away. Kevin, are they going to be easy on us?
I think they're trying to be. That's a good part. One of the questions that I did have, I know that one of the clients asked me about M3A. They asked whether there was a requirement for SISView to be there to do the M3A, and the answer is no. But M3A is it's very low cost. It really is a very low cost service for the skills of technicians that you're getting. If it has SISView, then the technician will spend less time in order to tune your site, and therefore it actually ends up being sort of a savings for the customer. So while SISView is not required to do M3A, we do typically recommend the client consider it so that the technician can get his basic checkout done quicker and then work more towards looking at other things to enhance and improve the service. So that was one question I wanted to go ahead and address that came in.
Okay.
No other questions out there? Well,
everybody must be ready for lunch.
Yeah, I guess we ran 2 minutes over, so people are going to abandon us without asking questions. As Sheila said earlier, though, please, if you have any questions about Datacom, our future, our modernization strategy, how to get some of this stuff done, just reach out to Sheila Miller at CA.com or Kevin Schuman at CA.com, and we'll be glad to sit down and talk with you. If you have questions about how your site's doing, some future things you're looking at, hardware, you would like for us to visit with you, please reach out to Sheila. She's our front man, if you will, and has been doing a lot of client visits for us and has been really building up a much larger integrated client base. We really want the clients to feel comfortable with Datacom and our future, and the only way to do that is to really share with you where we are and make sure we're meeting your goals. So with that, I guess, Sheila, I'll turn it back over to you and Lynn to close out the call.
Yeah, just one quick correction there. My email address is actually sheila.miller2@ca.com. Had to put the 2 in there.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. If there's no other questions, thanks very much, Kevin. Thanks, Sheila, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, all. Take care.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye, guys.
The leader has disconnected. The conference